guys, this is my discussion 3 ed talk. I'm going to start off with this picture here, and really I feel like this summed up what teaching the taboo was trying to tell me. Classrooms shouldn't be black and white. There's no right or wrong answer. Instead, it should be a place where students are there to learn how to learn, and they can be creative with what they're doing in their lives. And that really directly translates from the classroom out into the real world. So we need to create an environment where the diversities are welcomed. And it's a way to kind of help unite our students and bring them together into this environment where they're comfortable and confident and ready to rule the world, which is ultimately what we want our students to feel like they can do. Next, we have this picture, and it says engage your students in learning. So in chapter 6 and 7 of classroom management, they were really focusing on implementing the engaging instruction that's needed in order to minimize distractions in class. So there's obviously a direct relationship between your engaging instruction and your effective classroom management. The more engaged they are, the less behavioral issues will come up. And so as long as you have proper planning, it's really not that difficult to make sure that this is happening in your classroom. Before your lesson even begins, you need to make sure that your physical layout is appropriate for what you're going to have the students do. You need to have all the materials ready for them and know how they're going to be given this material, whether it's you're passing it out, you have a student pass it out, or they get one on their way in. During the lesson, you have to just make sure that the content is relevant to their lives, that it's representing the diversity that you have in your classroom, not just one set of students. You need to make sure that the instructions are clear and modeled, because a lot of students need to actually visually see somebody else doing it. And you have to make sure that the students are working well in their groups, that they know how to work in groups, because some students don't know how to work in groups, and that can really lead to problems further down the line. Furthermore, we need to make sure that we're circulating the room and providing our students with feedback as we go, because that kind of helps make sure that they're all in the right direction and the right path. So it'll be less of a shocker at the end if we have 30 students that were off task when we walked around and saw that they were all on task. You know what I mean? After the lesson, we need to provide students with feedback in a timely manner. So once they submit whatever the end result was, we need to make sure that the feedback is provided quickly. We also might even consider getting student feedback on the lessons that we taught, what they liked, what they didn't like. It's kind of up to our own style and what we prefer. I know that I would love student feedback, because if my students are feeling like they're engaged in learning, that's kind of a successful lesson in my book. And if they feel like something could be changed, well, now I know what I should do to change it. The next chapter talks about discipline. So everything we've talked about up to this point is how we should prevent even having to get to the discipline level. So this chapter really talks about preventative strategies as well as responsive ones. The four key things to prevent misbehavior would be: 1, witness, which is constantly monitoring student behavior and being aware of the class and stopping the problem before it even occurs. That's when you see, hey, this student looks like they're just staring off in space. Hey, Stacy, get a book and read. Hey, do this. The next key out of the 4 is overlapping, which is simply the teacher's ability to do more than one thing at a time to keep the flow going in the class. So if you get a phone call, well, you can be on that phone, but you can still have your students working. Stuff like that, which is kind of second nature, I think, to all of us. Third on the list was signal, which is signaling. So it's simply keeping the lesson flowing at an appropriate pace with little to no gaps. Lastly, effective classroom managers provide a variety and different levels of challenges within their assignments to keep students engaged. With all of that said and done, there will be times when students do misbehave. There are minor ones and more serious misbehaviors. So there are 3 guidelines to dealing with misbehavior. The first would be to preserve the dignity of the student. So we know this: don't embarrass your students in front of the class. And this can cause resentment, which leads to further misbehavior, leads to absences in your class, all of this. So we just really want to make sure that when we do discipline the student, we do it to the side of the class, not in front of everybody, not ridiculing or belittling them. Next, we need to make sure that we keep the lesson going. We have these misbehaviors, but we need to maximize our learning time unless it's a serious misbehavior. that might even address the class as a whole. Next, we need to use consistent language with all students, but we need to make sure that they understand what we're saying with our language and be flexible when classifying our misbehaviors, but not responding to them. We need to be consistent with with our punishments, but we also need to be understanding of the students and kind of try to get to the root of why they are misbehaving, because sometimes it's just because they want attention, sometimes it's because they need extra help, so we need to be able to be aware of that. Furthermore, we have to, for minor behaviors, start with nonverbal and then move to verbal. Nonverbal can be as simple as just standing next to the student that's talking, giving them a look, giving them a hand signal to keep working, anything like that. Verbal can praise students that are performing appropriate behaviors, so that the student that's performing inappropriate behavior can kind of realize what they're doing, I suppose you could say. And it serves as a reminder for the inappropriate behavior. For serious behavior, the consequences need to be determined based on the teacher. There can, of course, be like a scale. You start out with your first, your second, your third. But they should be related to the misbehavior, respectful of the student, not intended to humiliate or hurt them, and reasonable to correct the mistake. They need to not be excessively severe. If there's chronic misbehavior, well, we need to implement behavioral modification. We can create a contract with consequences that are clearly stated. We can even create those consequences with the student in question. We'll have them track progress towards a goal and then reinforce their positive behaviors, where the student can actually choose whatever reward was previously agreed upon and work towards that goal. Which I really like that. I always thought about how I would handle misbehaviors in the classroom, and I never thought about creating a contract with the student, which would actually work great for middle school and high school students because they are learning to take responsibility for themselves. So I really appreciated that section of the text. For what should I do? I have a little picture here. It says, it's fair. Everyone gets an equal amount. So you see the little, I think it's the little rat and the little bunny super excited because they got a lot of food. And the horse and the kangaroo and the dog are kind of like, not so equal. And this is exactly what we need to remember in our classroom. We need to assess our students, obviously. That's a very large part of education. But it needs to be in relation to the classmates and others. We need to think about, should all students, regardless of language ability, be required to take the same assessments? Should we make modifications? Should we not take into account all the other influences in their lives? I think we should, because I've been a student in that sea. I've been the EL learner, I've been the hyper student, I've been all these things. And had I not had teachers who kind of assessed me, modified my assessment, they didn't change it, they just modified it, I might not be where I am today, because I might have been discouraged or just kind of thought, well, I can't do it. And so we need to remember that there are factors outside of the classroom even that are influencing student works that we can't control as teachers. And we can kind of help them, but we cannot control them. Furthermore, chapter 5 was talking about how we need to include the taboo in our curriculum. Let's see if we go back to this picture. And because not doing so denies and suppresses the chance for students to talk about things that they do deal with in life. Our students do deal with drug abuse and sex and gender issues and all these topics that many teachers just want to steer clear of. But I think we need to welcome the taboo because it helps create a passionate, positive learning environment in the classroom where the students can kind of feel comfortable and express their creativity and develop minds of their own, which I think ultimately is the goal of education, to have these students be able to go into the real world and be a force to be reckoned with because they are their own person and they can think for themselves. Thank you.